Awesome. And let's chat about this month's theme. So this is a little bit of a fun theme just because whenever myself and Ian, Gordon's wine director, we're putting together each monthly CruBox, a lot of times we love to focus on whether it's a specific importer or specific country or region or grape varietal, but sometimes we just get excited about wines and we think about ways to connect them in the best ways that we can. But I think the most important thing with CruBox when we first started it is to really select wines of quality and that come from a specific sense of place. So this theme, I guess, was a little bit of a hodgepodge, but at the same time, I feel like it worked. So we called this a FrItalian Potpourri as French and Italian, and we have kind of a mixture of different things. But the kind of one theme that lies true is these are all singular grape varietals that we'll explore some really interesting areas. So we have two different wines coming from, or actually, yeah, two different wines coming from France and the eastern side, and then two different wines coming from Italy and kind of central and northern Italy. So it should be a pretty fun exploration. And what I'll do is I'll walk you through each wine. We'll talk about each one. And honestly, too, just feel free to make this as interactive as you'd like. You can ask questions about these wines. You can just ask questions in general. So we'll have a good time. But I thought we'd start you off with our first selection, which is the 2020 Romaine Chamillon Après-Mont, which is coming from the Savoie. So I'm taking you all first to the eastern part of France in the Savoie, and I'll actually share my screen with you in a second as I do have a map, because I think that will be helpful. So give me one sec here, and I'll share it. Awesome. Oops. Right. Zooming away. Awesome. Okay. Oh, why is it doing that? Oh, because it would be helpful if I presented. Awesome. Okay. Can everybody see? Just give me a thumbs up the map. Can you guys see a map? Oh, good. That's exciting. All right. So I thought I'd take you to the Savoie. I'm going to just say this isn't the best map I've ever seen. It's actually really hard to find good quality wine maps. If anybody wants to go into business and try something new, wine maps are definitely something that is needed. And I actually thought about it myself because it's sometimes just a really challenging thing to find. And a good map really is such an important So we have here a map of the Savoie. So as you can see here, we're in the eastern part of France. You can see the reference of France down at the bottom. And it's actually just bordering Switzerland. So you have a lot of kind of Swiss grape varietals that sometimes cross over. And while you don't see a lot of Swiss grapes in the US, you're starting to see a little bit more here and there. So we have here a couple different subregions that you see.
So we're talking about the Rouge.
No, we're not talking about the first one.
Rudy, yes, we're just talking about the Romaine Chamillon, the Après-Mont. We're starting with the white wine.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. It's all good. So we're starting with the Savoie, so in the eastern part of France, and you see that there's kind of three main subregions at the top of the map. You can see the Vin de Savoie, which is kind of the larger general appellation there, which is in a little bit more of kind of like a pinkish reddish color. Even though it's hard to kind of differentiate between that orange and the pinkish reddish. And then the Roussette de Savoie, which is a small region. You see that there's a town called Frangy right there. That's an area that's known for this grape varietal called Roussette, an indigenous varietal of the Savoie. And then this area here in yellow called Seyssel, which I've never seen any wines from this area brought over to the US. It's actually known for sparkling wine production overall. And then once again, the Vin de Savoie is kind of the largest general appellation. And from within Vin de Savoie, you have about 17 different crus or village sites that are most well known for some of the highest quality production. So we'll chat about that in a second. All right, see, we have it here. So you can see here with the Vin de Savoie, you have your Après-Mont. This is a different producer that you see there on the label, but Après-Mont is once again the cru from within the Savoie. It's a little village, which is one of the top village sites for production. And then you see here the Roussette de Savoie and the Seyssal. I'm going to get rid of this now and stop sharing. Okay, we're back to the fun. Okay, so Romain Chamillon is the producer. This is a about third generation family run producer, and it is imported by Rosenthal, which is one of the importers that you might notice we do work a lot with at Gordon's, and we work with them once again because the quality is just really great, and we do have such a love for French and Italian wines, so it works out perfectly. But the interesting thing is when Neil Rosenthal first brought on the producer Romain Chamillon, it was because he was having a visit with another producer called Bitouzet, who's in Burgundy, and Romain Chamillon and Vincent Bitouzet actually went to school together in Burgundy. So that was kind of how they formed the connection. And this has been one of the most successful Savoie properties that Rosenthal brings in. So you have here on the label, we have once again Après-Mont, which is our cru appellation Savoie Contrôlée. So this is technically a Vin de Savoie. And you might be wondering the grape varietal, because it would be helpful. The grape varietal here is Jacquère. So Jacquère is an indigenous grape varietal to the Savoie. Most well-known, I'd say around 70% of production in the Savoie is white wine. And Jacquère is definitely the most widely planted grape varietal that you find in some of the most quality wines. Après-Mont is going to be one of the most traditional places where you'd find it from, but there's another appellation just our cru right next door called Abymes, spelled A-B-Y-M-E-S, which is another excellent area right next door to find wonderful Jacquère. And then to the north, there's a appellation called or cru called Jean-Jo, which starts with a J, and that's also well known for Jacquère as well. But you find that in the north in the Savoie, that the Jacquère tends to be very mineral driven, and sometimes you have that hint of lemon, but it's a cleaner kind of style. Whereas as you get down to the south, the Après-Mont and like Abymes, that other fruit that I mentioned next door, tend to be a little bit more richly perfumed. And you find more of those kind of stone fruit and like peach, apricot kind of characteristics that come through, which is really interesting. So I love this area. I don't know, for me personally, when I'm thinking about summer freshness, like this just really excites me. I'm a huge fan, and maybe it's because I'm a skier, but I'm a real fan of mountainous wine regions. I always find them to be just so exciting. And this is actually one of the regions that I've really been itching to travel to alongside the Jura, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But you might also be wondering too, before we kind of get in and taste these wines, what other grape varietals you might find in the Jura, in the Savoie. So beyond Jacquère, you find a grape varietal called Altesse, an indigenous grape varietal to the area, another white grape. And then you also find a grape called Bergeron, kind of like our hockey player, same spelling, but it's actually known as Rousson. If you've ever had Rousson, it's a grape varietal that comes from the Rhone Valley in France overall, and Bergeron is also known as Rousson in the Savoie. And then you also do have a small amount of red production there too. One of the most classic grapes is a grape called Mondoze. Romain Chamillon actually also makes a Mondoze. It's a light kind of peppery, fragrant red wine that's traditional from the area. And then you also find too a little Pinot Noir and Gamay that are sprinkled kind of throughout. So very exciting stuff. I'll say too one more thing before going into this wine. Something that makes Après-Mont so interesting and I think really distinctive, both Après-Mont and Abymes, is actually in the village. There was a mountain called Mont Granier, which in the 1200s actually completely had a landslide, which actually killed thousands of people. So it's extremely devastating. But at the same time, it deposited all this huge trail of limestone that kind of was deposited all throughout Après-Mont and the neighboring Abymes. So Après-Mont translates, I think, roughly to bitter mountain, and the neighboring cru of Abîme translates to kind of ruins or chasm. So they're both kind of reflecting this historical moment that happened, but really shaped the terroir of the area, which has given you all these beautiful limestone deposits that gives you just a lot of really fresh mineral-driven wines. So interesting stuff. I will taste the wine with you because it's so delicious. All right. So I've always been, once again, a huge fan of like Jacquer. Definitely I've had overall a lot more Abîme and Après-Mont than the Jean-Jo, which is that other appellation to the north. But what I love about this wine is it's incredibly fun to do with like fondue or some of those fun, wintry, more alpine themed dishes. But it also is beautiful for the summer, whether it's having it with fish or just relaxing on its own. When we kind of stick our nose in the glass here, once again, it's really that peach and like stone fruit that jumps out at me. Almost kind of like that peach, like peaches and cream peach. It just is so pungent and so aromatic and perfumed. And what's interesting here is on the palate, you get a lot of that minerality that comes through, which kind of also reads to me like that kind of refreshing bitterness that makes you feel like very thirst quenched. But you also find here too, especially as you let this wine kind of warm in the glass just a little bit, that there's some like a little viscosity and texture that kind of hits you at the end here. When this wine is vinified, Romain actually chooses to have like just a touch of residual sugar here, which gives you just a little lift. It gives you a little bit more kind of voluptuousness to this wine. That makes it quite interesting and really kind of can stand up to some of these stronger dishes, like a stronger kind of fish dish with a nice salsa. Or, I mean, I had put as a pairing the Tome de Savoie. I don't know if anybody's gotten to try that cheese, but it is one of my favorite things in the entire world. It's an Alpine cheese that can be like a little nutty and herbaceous, and there's a lot of different iterations of it, but it makes me incredibly happy, as most cheese does. But I'd love to hear just any questions that you have about this wine, feedback, thoughts. Did you like it, if anybody got to try it? If no one has anything to say, I will move on. But once again, please feel free in any way to speak up. And you can too, as I'm talking, like we're a small group, please feel free to just ask a question when you feel it's the time. I'm happy to stop. As many of you know at this point, I can continue talking for quite a while. Okay, so I'm gonna take you from Après-Mont in the Savoie in Eastern France. Oh, Rudy, I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you. And then we're going to go to actually a pretty interesting area. We're going to travel to Lombardy. So I'm going to share my screen with you again really quickly. Oh, Jeff, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, no problems. Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody can see, but I'm taking you to Lombardy. So you can see here up in like the top corner, it shows you where Lombardy is in relation to everywhere in Italy. It's going to be north central Italy. And of course, this is the region that's most well known for where Milan or Milano lies on the map. To the east, you're going to find Piedmont or Piemonte. To the west, find Piemonte. To the east, you're going to find the Veneto, and you'll find also to Emilia-Romagna as well. In the Alto Adige. So it's a really interesting area, definitely, of course, well known for the cuisine, the culture, and known for a lot of different really interesting wines. I thought it would be kind of cool to show you this map just because it gives you an idea of all of the DOCGs and the DOCs of Lombardy, as it's an area I don't feel like we see as much wine from as like the Eastern and Western counterparts. So you can see here up top for the DOCGs. Franciacorta is probably one of the most classic DOCGs. It's a sparkling wine that's made in the spumante style, so the same method as Champagne, which comes typically from Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And then actually Otrepo Pavese, which is the region we'll go to next, which is in the southwestern corner, that blue area. That's actually most well known for this Metodo Classico sparkling wines that they make. I actually haven't had a lot of them before. Like, it's once again not really something that you see here. But the interesting thing about Otrepo Pavese, which we'll kind of discuss throughout this, is it's actually one of the third largest kind of land areas or DOCs as a whole. That's, I think, right behind Asti in Piedmont and Chianti in Tuscany. So there's a lot of wine made in this little southwestern corner here. And then there's a lot of stuff too here, like Scanzo, something I really never ever see, but Sforzo di Valtellina is a wonderful wine that's made with the Nebbiolo grape varietal and Valtellina Superiore. If anybody wants to explore some iterations of Nebbiolo outside of Piemonte, it's definitely a great area to go. And then you have a kind of hodgepodge of DOCs here. Once again, a lot of which you don't really see as much in the States. A lot of these are kind of more local wines, but definitely an interesting area nonetheless. I think that was it for that. Yes, we'll go back. Stop. All right, cool. So we have the Bruno Verdi 2020 Otrepo Pavese Pinot Grigio. So I would normally not always have Pinot Grigio in a CruBox. And the only reason I say that is because there are a lot of really insipid Pinot Grigios out there. I'm sure we've all had them before. It is a grape that is one of the most widely planted white grape varietals of Italy. And it is actually most well known for being in the northeastern corner where you get that cluster of the Veneto, the Alto Adige and Friuli, Venezia Giulia. And definitely the majority of kind of those kind of large brand names are going to be coming from the Veneto and these low-lying hills. So this was kind of an interesting area, a little outside the norm for Pinot Grigio production. Otrepo Pavese is actually just located in the, as we talked about, the southwestern corner, which is basically a budding Piemonte, and then you have Liguria, where like Potpourri lies on the map, just also to the south. So kind of an interesting area. There's a lot of really interesting grapes planted here. Pinot Grigio, I'd say, isn't the most well known. It's actually most well known for Pinot Nero or Pinot Noir production that they use for sparkling wine and for still. And they actually also too are planting a good deal of Riesling, interestingly enough, for those of you who want to explore a little northern Italian Riesling. But this is a producer, Bruno Verde, another Rosenthal favorite. And it's a producer that actually goes back to, I think, about 8 generations of winemaking. It goes back to the 18th century. And when the original family members came, they actually had originally started farming a lot of different like local produce and wheat and some different kind of local staples. But it was in the 3rd generation where they decided to start growing grape varietals as well. And it was, I think, after World War II when Bruno Verdi, hence the name, started actually selling his wines outside of the winery more commercially. And unfortunately, Bruno passed away, I think, pretty suddenly and unexpectedly at not quite that old of an age in the 1980s. So his son, Paolo, has taken over, Paolo Verdi, has taken over wine production. And now his kids are starting to get involved. He's a son and a daughter. So kind of continuing on that family trend, which is very cool. Most of the grape varietals that they source for this wine come from a little village that's called Canneto Pavese. And it's an area that's known in terms of soils for sand, silt, clay, a little limestone as well. And also an interesting thing about Otrepo Pavese as a region is it's on the 45th parallel, which is actually a pretty ideal spot for grape growing, where it's basically smack dab in the middle of the equator and in the North Pole. So you have some pretty great moderating temperatures. In addition to the Pinot Grigio that Bruno Verde plants and the Riesling they plant, they grow a lot of these indigenous red grape varietals that are very typical. One called Uva rara, which basically translates to rare grape, red grape. Another one called Croatina, which you also find in the Alto Piemonte or Northern Piedmont as well, a really lovely grape varietal. They grow a little Barbera, as they're very close to Piemonte, Bonarda, and then you have a grape that's called Ugetta, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is also known as Vespolina, which some of you might have tried before. It's sometimes in addition to Nebbiolo, very traditional grape varietal to blend in some of the northern Nebbiolos from Alto Piemonte, especially like if you've ever had like Gattinara before, you can definitely see some Vespolina as a blending grape. And then they do Pinot Nero as well, so a little bit of everything. But definitely an interesting area to explore, and really an area that we don't get to see as much broadly. So very cool. I'm going to taste this wine with you, talk about it. What's interesting about Pinot Grigio, once again, as a grape, is it is sometimes a grape that's not always taken very seriously because it is so widely planted. But there are some wonderful Pinot Grigios or Pinot Gris out there. And think of it too, this is a mutation of the Pinot Noir grape. And with that, you have just some interesting complexity that can come forth. You can too choose to take the grape skins of Pinot Grigio, because Gris or Grigio translates to gray. So once again, the berry, actually, if you look at a picture, and I didn't put one on this little slideshow, I should have done that. It actually has like a coppery pinkish skin. So if you've ever tried it before, there's some especially styles up in Friuli that are called like a Romato, and they'll take the grape skins and let them soak for several hours, similar to what you do with like a rosé. And you can actually have like a more coppery, beautiful hue, which is really interesting and quite delicious, if I might say so myself. They also do that too, very typically in Slovenia, if anybody here has experienced Slovenian wine. For me, definitely like on the nose here, a lot more of that kind of like golden delicious apple, but still some of that kind of like apricot and a little hint of like pear and peach. Ooh. On the palate too, the acidity kind of like hits you right away. I felt like with the après-mont that we had before, it was like a lot of like minerals, and it had a little bit more like unctuousness or voluptuousness. This definitely has some body to it, but it kind of like hits you, and then the finish comes, and there's not, it's like a little bit more linear, I guess, in that sense. But this I feel like I would want to do with food, maybe not as much sipping on its own, whereas the après-mont I would want to do with food, but I'd also just like be super happy to sip that. That's just my personal opinion. I had actually chosen to pair this with a like a risotto, which I thought would be fun, just because seafood risottos, especially something kind of like traditionally Milanese, I think are always really great. But this, especially with the charcuterie or any type of like salty meats, I think would be ideal. Like even like a melon and prosciutto, I think would be really nice. Any thoughts, questions, feelings you want to share? Alrighty. Well, I'll say too about both wines. Both of these wines don't see any oak, of course. Both are stainless steel aged. I think possibly one of them might have a little concrete. The après-mont might have a little concrete mixture with stainless steel. But once again, wines to be kind of fresh and really interesting, fun summer whites to pair with a variety of different things from some interesting areas that we don't always get to see. That's what makes like wine so much fun for me, and I'm sure for you as well, just because there's just so many amazing places to explore. And I don't know about you, but it always gets me looking at travel plans. I actually, for the Roman Chamillon, I am a subscriber of Food and Wine magazine, and they just did a write-up this summer on Savoie as a region to travel to, and it looks just like exceptional. And I will go back to Piedmont any day, and would be happy to go to Lombardy too. That is like my dream. So I don't know about you guys, but once you're ready to start traveling, please always feel free to hit me up for some recommendations, because that's something that I love doing so much. So without further ado, if there are no questions, thoughts, or feedback, I will go on to the next wine. We feeling good? Let's do it. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. Hopefully you guys can all see this. We are in the Jura. So the Jura is basically just going to be to the east of Burgundy, and then a little bit to the northwest of Savoie. So sometimes they're grouped together a little bit, even though they are very, very different. I'd say the Savoie is known for just much more approachable wines, even though the grape varietals are, not grapes that we're as familiar with per se, but the wines are just incredibly refreshing and minerally, especially for the whites. Whereas the Jura is definitely like a wild child of France, which actually makes some of the most serious wines. But what's so interesting is like some of the wines are just really complex and kind of a little hard to understand. So it takes like a little decoding, I think, to be able to figure it out. And I'm still honestly working through them. So, because it's an area that up until recently, I just didn't really explore as much. And I'm having so much fun doing it, but you definitely have to keep an open mind and it can get real geeky. So we have kind of the Côte de Jura, which is all in that purpley area. That's going to be your kind of main overarching appellation. And then you have the Arbois all the way to the north, Chateau Chalon, L'Étoile, and those are kind of going to be your most traditional areas. You have, in terms of grape varietals planted in the Jura, you're working with a lot of interesting things. So you're working with for white grapes, predominantly Chardonnay, a lot of Chardonnay production there, as once again, it makes sense. You're just to the east of Burgundy. But then you have another grape varietal there called Savagnin. A lot of people see the spelling and it looks like Sauvignon Blanc or Sauvignon, and it is not. So that is a very common misconception and very confusing. It's a grape varietal that actually makes one of the most, I'd say, classic wines of the Jura, or one of the most famous wines of the Jura, which is Vin Jaune, which is basically a wine that is aged for, I think the minimum aging requirements are usually around 6 years or so in barrel, but they do it in a way where they create like an oxidative style wine with like some floor yeast at the top, kind of more similar to sherry. So the wines have great aging potential, but they're incredibly nutty and oxidized, and they're definitely not for the faint of heart. I think is a good way of putting them. If you like oxidative style wines, it's definitely something I recommend exploring, and happy to give you some recommendations. But it is definitely like a really interesting and unique style of wine that is produced in the Jura. A lot of the Chardonnay too is sometimes also made in a more oxidative style. I actually had a really interesting wine too. There's a great producer called Domaine Tissot, which is from the Jura, and they make Cremant de Jura, which is the sparkling wine, which those wines can be phenomenal and can be kind of very akin to champagne because they're typically using Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But they had a rare clone of Chardonnay called the Chardonnay Rosé clone, which they have small plantings in Burgundy and some in the Jura, and it's actually Chardonnay that has a little bit of like a rose-colored like tint to it. It's quite beautiful. And they can be very mineral driven, but sometimes depending on the producer, they can, make a more oxidative style. So you definitely have raw the Savagnin and the Chardonnay for white. For red grapes, of course, you do have a lot of Pinot Noir planted, as it is, to the east of Burgundy, and that's one of the classic grape varietals. But you also have Trousseau, a grape varietal we'll chat about for our next wine, the Domaine de la Lue, Le Rouge. And then another grape varietal called Pulsard. A lot of times a red grape that's blended with Trousseau. And let's think if there's anything else that I'm missing. I think those would be the main grape varietals that you'd find. But definitely very interesting, and it's a lot of fun to explore. Our third wine, so I'll mention it, is the 2020 Domaine de la Lue, Le Rouge. This is by a winemaker named Catherine Hanu, and this should be about 100% Trousseau. There's a possibility she might blend in just a little sprinkling of Pinot Noir and a little sprinkling of Pulsard, but it should be the majority Trousseau. This is under that Côte de Jura, or actually, no, I'm so sorry. This is not Côte de Jura. It's a Vin de France. So I imagine the reason that this is not Côte de Jura or Arbois is actually Catherine's property is basically within that Arbois designation, but she does farm quite naturally, and she might be doing some things that don't see eye to eye with like the governing body. It's a possibility. So sometimes some producers will downgrade their wines to Vin de France to kind of stay within the guidelines. It's a little confusing sometimes to always know why, but this is a wine that does come from right within the Arbois. She is like within this little village, and actually what's interesting about Catherine Hanoun is she actually purchased this property about, I think she has around 2.5 hectares. She purchased it in around 2009 after seeing, I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Mondo Vino, but she saw that movie and she was really into it, and she just decided to leave her career in film and to go into winemaking and just kind of taught herself. And she's just a big wine dork like myself, and just wanted to kind of get out there. So she farms, she feels like she can farm the 2.5 hectares basically on her own, but she really won't grow any larger than that. And she makes about, I think about 4 different wines, a Blanc, the Le Blanc. She does a Arbois Sauvignon, and she does, I think, an Arbois Chardonnay as well. But definitely cool, fun stuff. So we have about 100% Trousseau here. And I'm so into this grape varietal. Whenever I have Trousseau, I always feel like it's a wine that tastes like very peppery to me. What's interesting is it is a thicker skinned grape, but it doesn't always give off a lot of color in the glass. So they macerated this wine for a good amount of time. I think it was held on the skins for several weeks, like about 5 weeks or so. And it still doesn't give off a lot of color, but it's a wine that sometimes can be light and peppery. Sometimes it has like a lot more depth to it too, and a lot more kind of earthiness to it that kind of also combines with like dark fruit. All right. On the nose, for me, it's a lot of that, like, once again, dark cherry pepper. Sometimes too, I know this sounds strange, but I get some citrus out of this grape, which is actually very traditional. Sometimes you can get like a little bit of that orange marmalade or like little like bitter lemon that comes through, which you just don't always expect with a red wine, but you know, reds can be deceiving for sure. And then you definitely get like some of that kind of like a gamey, those gamey qualities. On the palate too, what's interesting is it can be like a little grippy, but it finishes pretty smooth. And overall, like I'd say in terms of body too, this feels for me like a little more of that, like right in between that like light and medium body, but it does have some like grip to it as well. It's a very interesting wine. And this is once again, another one of those wines I love to do with like, you know, a charcuterie board. I think it's always delicious. I think I had put this with a pasta with like sausages and like, I think like tomatoes and squash, which I think would be really yummy too. But this is just like such a fun wine, even too with like grilled, like something on the grill, like even gamey, like a game bird or something like that. I think could be really nice as well. So yummy.
We can confirm that it works nicely with the pasta dish you recommended.
Oh, cool. Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
That's such a good dish. I love that so much. That's awesome. There's nothing I love more than like delicious summer pasta dishes. That's awesome.
You know, I mean, for me, on the nose, it's almost got a piney quality to it.
Yeah, like a little bit
like a turpentine.
That's interesting. I love it. This is just like one of those wines that sometimes can fall into that contemplative category for me. Because it's not to say that this is me, you know, this is not a wine that's meant to go the long distance, but I think that the aromas of Trousseau are always quite contemplative for me. And I always kind of am getting new things out of the wine, which I think is just always so much fun. You can also see too, so Catherine Hanoun and actually our last producer that we're working with, the Collection Creta, they're kind of more on that natural scale. So this is a wine actually we kind of direct imported in collaboration with one of our favorite importers called Vineyard Road. And it's a winemaker that definitely focuses on a lot of those like natural winemaking techniques. And you can definitely see that in the glass too, in terms of the fact that this is an unfiltered wine. You can see some of the cloudiness that comes through. And she's using too, you know, all biodynamic farming and just all handmade, very, very limited production here. But I think it's a quite interesting wine and a lot of fun. And a lot of trousseaus have given me a lot of joy. So I think it's definitely something really exciting to explore. And the Jura, if anybody is kind of interested afterwards and chatting about it more, there's a lot of producers and some insights that I can give you if you want to further explore. But both the Jura and the Savoie are really interesting areas and both wonderful to visit too, if anybody will be traveling.
Yeah, this one was, there was so much on the nose, and then like just taking a sip of it, it was kind of wild. Like, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
What did I say? It was like sweet, smoky, and tart all at the same time. It was so good.
It's with a lot of different punches there.
Yeah.
For sure. It's really good. And it is definitely into a wine that I would put as a food wine. Like, it's not necessarily, and this is, I think, true with a lot of French and Italian wines overall. I wouldn't necessarily just like sip this on its own like I would with some Pinot Noirs. I think it does need some food, but it's so interesting and so much fun to play around with. And especially too with the chill on it, you know, in the summertime, like especially with the grill or any kind of smoked components too, I think could be really, really nice.
Yeah, I'm making a version of like the sausage and zucchini pasta right now, so I'm excited to try it with food afterwards.
Oh, that'll be fun. That's awesome. Any other questions that I can answer about the Domaine de la Lue or like Trousseau, Le Rouge, the wine? Any questions, thoughts, or feedback? Cool. We'll move on to the next. I'll share my screen one more time. And let's see. All right. Share. All right. Okay. Hopefully you can all see this. But all right. So we're in Umbria. So as you can see, now the last wine is going to be the 2018 Collezione Leccese, which is coming from Umbria. And Umbria is going to be in the central part of Italy. Just to the east is, or sorry, to the west. I'm really bad with my directions today because I'm looking at it in two different ways. If you're going to the west, you'll have, of course, Tuscany. To the east, you're going to have, I think, the Marche. Yep, the Marche is going to be right to the east. So I've actually not gotten to visit any wine regions yet in Umbria, but I've driven through it on a wine tour before, and I can't wait to come back. I was actually in 2020 going to do a Tuscan and Umbrian wine trip, which obviously got postponed. So I'm fingers crossed have it for the spring. So I'll report back. But we have here, what's interesting I think about Umbria is, of course, it's overshadowed by Tuscany, which is right next door. But it has some really interesting areas to explore for those Italian wine lovers here. One of the most well-known appellations within Umbria is going to be Orvieto, which was a very fashionable white wine, especially I feel like during like the 90s, early 2000s. I remember like my mom was always drinking Orvieto, and it's a blend typically of a lot of different grape varietals. Among them, Grechetto is one of the main grapes, but usually makes kind of a simple everyday wine. And actually one of my favorite wines here, if we're looking, is if you see Montefalco, the area right there, there's a wonderful wine called Sagrantino de Montefalco, or like step below could be like Montefalco Rosso. It's coming from the Sagrantino grape varietal. And Sagrantino is definitely one of the most like powerful red wines of Italy. Not as powerful maybe as Amarone because of their aging, but Sagrantino just has a lot of tannin, a lot of texture, and it's kind of like a Brunello de Montalcino, but like more intense. And the wines are phenomenal. One of our favorite producers is Paulo Bea, who's a biodynamic producer, and they make some phenomenal wines. So if anybody is interested in exploring Sagrantino another time, be happy to take you through that, as it's a lot of fun. But we're actually going to be, technically the region here, it's just, I think Umbria is the IGT. So it's just an IGT, stands for Indicazione Geografica Tipica, which is the larger kind of designation, as this winery doesn't kind of fall within one of the kind of more traditional areas of production. So this is actually a little winery that's right outside of the town of Spoleto. So you can see Spoleto there. It has actually like no color to it, which isn't helpful. And then I'll talk about the winery in a second, but I'm just going to take you to one more slide here, because you can see how many acres, and then you can also see all the different grape varietals here too. As you might have guessed, Sangiovese is the most widely planted grape varietal of Umbria, as it is one of the most widely planted grapes of Italy to begin with. But you have, of course, here Trebbiano varieties, which are a white grape. There's a lot of different kind of iterations of Trebbiano, but well known for a lot of kind of bulk wine production and a lot of blending. The grape Grechetto, which is known for especially being in Orvieto and a lot of white blends. Merlot, which has taken over a lot of plantings. There's a ton of Merlot that's come into both Tuscany and Umbria. And then, as you can see, Sagrantino, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malvasia, Chardonnay, Verdelho, Montepulciano, Pinot Gris, and some others. So Sangiovese is still king in Umbria and can make some really phenomenal wines. I'm going to stop the share now. Give it a sec. Awesome. Okay. So Colleto Preta basically translates to Hill of the Goats, which is interesting, which is just this little village that the Mattioli family has farmed. They've been farming, I think, for at least, I think it goes back 3 or 4 generations. And this is from a importer actually, which is called Selectio Natural, which you can see on the back. They're based out of Ipswich, so they're a local importer, and they've gotten a ton of traction, focusing on a lot of like more natural leaning and organic Italian small family-owned wineries. So you see this, I actually grew up in Gloucester, and I still go up there all the time. We have a little pasta shop up there, if anybody ever visits in Gloucester, called Pasteo, which is a fresh local pasta, and they have all like natural Italian wines. And this is actually one of the like best sellers up there. They actually, I think, have a house wine that they made just for Pasteo. So I've been seeing this label kind of everywhere in a lot of the kind of more small wine shops, a lot of bars as well. So it's definitely kind of getting circulation, even though it is very small production. Overall, the family only has about 8 hectares production. And this bottle count here, they only make about 5,000 bottles of this wine. So they have about, I think, 3 or 4 different wines that they make at any given time. And the production is always quite limited. In addition to farming grapes, they also farm olives and a bunch of other citruses and different produce. So it's not just grapes, but that's definitely where they've been the most successful. And we have Vittorio Mattioli, who is the current proprietor, and he lives, I think, with around 2 or 3 generations of family members in one home, and they all contribute to the winery. So it's very small, family owned. And all the like harvesting is done by hand. There's no mechanical harvesting in any way. All the wines too are unfined and unfiltered. And all of the wines too are aged in glass lined cement tanks. So there's no oak aging in any of the wines that they make. This is an interesting wine, as it's like kind of a more natural leaning approach to Sangiovese. And I think it's very different from the Sangiovese that we see a lot of times in Tuscany, especially in Chianti or in Brunello di Montalcino. This for me is an incredibly like earthy and rustic style wine. And even too, like the color, like you can always see with the Sangiovese, you tend to have some of these like kind of brickish, kind of orangey hues that come through, which is kind of classic of Sangiovese. You can also find this too with Nebbiolo. So that's sometimes why when people are blind tasting the two, you can sometimes get a little confused which is which. They can sometimes have some similar color. But I don't know about you, I poured this a while ago. I think like it was really, really kind of funky at first and very earthy. And I think as it's like opened up a little bit too, it's like softened quite a bit. Ooh.
Wow.
So for me, like a lot of times Sangiovese can have these like beautiful kind of herbaceous qualities, but also kind of these woodsy, piney qualities as well. And a lot of that like dark cherry and like a little bit of wood here too. Like almost like that kind of like cedar, like sandalwood. Definitely a rustic kind of hardier style of Sangiovese that once again, I would choose to do with food over just like sipping. It's definitely more earth driven than like fruit driven for me. And I'd recommend to do this with like a bistecca, which is kind of the traditional like steak, I guess, of Tuscany, with like grilled like broccoli rabe, I think would be really nice. But I'd also do this too with something even more gamey, like lamb, like anything that's really kind of earthy and gamey, I think go really well with this. With like, you know, that rosemary or some of those really intense like green herbs, I think would be really lovely. It's a little
Hey,
pretty.
thanks for the shout out for Postaio in
Oh,
Gloucester.
are you a fan?
Oh, huge fans. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. You'll have to let me know when you're heading up to Gloucester. I have other recommendations too. I haven't.
We actually are in Gloucester right now. We have a house here.
Wow, I'm so excited to hear that. What part of Gloucester?
We're in Lanesville.
Amazing. Love that. It's so magical. That's wonderful. I'll also make a plug too, and I'm blanking on the name, so forgive me, but in, I think Bearskin Neck, there's an amazing glassware shop that just opened with like locally blown glass. They make beautiful wine glasses, water glasses. It's unbelievable. And I'll think of the name and send it to you. But I'm so excited.
Oh, definitely.
So happy. Gloucester honestly has just a lot going on, and it's been really exciting just to see you know, shops like Postaio be successful. Did you get your pasta from Postaio? Oh my gosh, this is my dream.
Unfortunately, not today. They're closed on Tuesdays.
Oh.
We were going to. We tried, but
Yeah, only Wednesday through Sunday.
Yeah, Danielle has a interesting schedule. In Gloucester, it's really traditional for things to be closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. So it's a weird schedule, but that's fun. Oh, that makes me happy. Oh, I'm so excited. It's awesome.
Yeah, the wall of wine at Postaio is crazy.
yeah, it's really, we've had some really wonderful wines from there.
Yeah, it's really fun to explore. There's also there's another great little wine shop. Oh, what's it called? Kathleen runs it. I'll think of it. I'll send it to you. I have a couple of recommendations that I'm going to send your way. That's awesome. How much longer will you be there?
A couple of weeks.
Oh, great. Oh, perfect.
But then we're up here weekends a lot.
Yeah, we're here all the time. We own the house.
So.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. Sorry, that's amazing. Cool. Well, we'll connect offline. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody have questions about the Costa Preta that I could answer for you, or just any thoughts or feedback that you'd like to share? I know we were a smaller group tonight, but I hope you guys enjoyed. There was definitely a lot of fun wines to kind of discover tonight. And I must say once again too, I think part of the fun of this for me, and I don't know for you, but it's like once again to really kind of keep an open mind and explore some of these really interesting areas. I find myself like I'm always trying to push like the boundaries and try different things, because it's so easy to kind of we all get in our little boxes or bubbles with wine, and it's like always so much fun. So that's sometimes why I love curating some of these wines, because I think to myself, oh my gosh, why haven't I had a Prémont in a long time? What was I thinking? Like there's always something exciting and fun to explore. And to always ask you if you like one of these producers very much, like I can always see if there's some other wines that they make like under that label that you might be interested in exploring, or other styles that you might be interested in. Like if you like the Après-Mont, I can recommend other Après-Monts, other Beam or Jean-Jo if you want to explore that, or you know, some really fun wines from the Jura to explore. Or I don't know if we have many other wines, Pinot Grigios from Ultra Pavese, but definitely Bruno Verde makes some other great wines too. And Colleccio Prete as well. So I'd be happy to always be like a reference or resource if I can ever help in any way. But it's always so much fun being with everybody. I'll stick around. I know we're going to end just a little earlier tonight, but figure unless people want to chat, I'm here for you and would love to do so. Don't mind my background. I just moved a couple days ago, so I'm figuring out my lighting. So this is the only place I can set my camera. But you can see my wine fridge in the back, and I need to fill it up because I had to move it from my other place, which was definitely a challenge. So it's awesome. It was so much fun being with everybody. And once again, I'll stick around if anybody wants to kind of continue to chat in any way, but it's always so much fun being with you all. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the evening and a wonderful rest of the summer. Soak it all up and enjoy. And I'll be reaching out about September's CruBox next week, which is very exciting.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Wonderful being with everybody.
We have questions. You wanna turn this
Yeah, please go for it.
So it's not this one related, but we're thinking about potentially doing like a honeymoon, I don't know, in Italy next year. Because Dennis is big on Italian wines. So like I guess the question is like what recommendations do you have in terms of like, I don't want to go like necessarily like the too crazy touristy route,
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want, right? Like it depends on if you want, the sun, if you want to be somewhere a little more alpine. I think about kind of the things that are like interesting to you, and like what you most enjoy doing. Like, do you want to hike? Do you want to bike? Do you just want to like chill and do nothing and enjoy that? Like, I think about some of the things that you like to do most and like how much time you have, and then maybe I could make like some recommendations. Because I've been to a lot of different regions in Italy, not all 20, but definitely at least 10. So I can definitely give you some insights. Like, for example, I have some friends that are doing their honeymoon partially in Piemonte, and I had some like great recommendations for them. But I was just in Sicily a couple of years ago, which is amazing. It depends on what you want out of the trip. So maybe if you want to let me know like what kind of you ideally would do, like for your trip, I can then make a recommendation of what area would be best to go to.
Okay, cool. I will email you certainly.
Let me suggest it is touristy, but for a honeymoon, the Amalfi Coast, the Positano,
Yeah.
is hard to beat. Let me tell you, I've been there.
Honestly, and you can always split it up too. Like, if you have the time, you could do the Amalfi Coast, but you could also do, just to the south, you'll have like Puglia too, which is like a little like more chill, but there's some really cool stuff to do there. I mean, honestly, when I went to the Amalfi Coast, I took the train from Rome, so you can like, you can switch it up and do some things, or you can drive. I guess it just depends on how much time you have.
Don't drive in Positano. Do not get in a car behind the wheel in Positano.
Hire someone to drive.
Get a
for
local to drive you.
Who knows what they're doing.
You will not survive. I'm not kidding.
It's an intense place. But it depends on how much time you have, once again, and how much you want to explore. Sometimes it can be nice to be in like one specific place and really get to explore that. But the cool thing about Italy too is you can do so many different things. I did a trip which was really fun where we went from Piedmont and then did Liguria, which is also quite like amazing place to honeymoon too, because that's where Cinque Terre is, right on the kind of like a Italian Riviera as well. And you have oh my gosh, what's the famous town that's there? I'll think about it in a second. There's like a famous little like coastal town. So my brain is not working obviously, but it'll come to me. That like we just like did a beautiful walk out to. It's just a gorgeous place to go to. So there's a lot of different options, and the Tuscan coast is quite amazing as well. So there's a lot of great choices. And then you can always get a couple days of Roman, because that's like the most.
Yeah. I've been, but Dennis has never been. So like I definitely, it's like it's really hard to kind of justify like balance the touristy slash just like want to sit and do nothing. Or like want to sit and kind of like take it all in versus like go of the touristy aspect of it for sure.
Well, the fun thing is about any of the more touristy cities in Italy is there's always like a kind of off the beaten path place you can go. So it doesn't always have to be like, super touristy, even though it can be like a well-known city. So I always have some good recommendations of some kind of off the beaten path places.
All right.
And
Cool. Yeah,
obviously-
no, I'll definitely reach out for sure.
Cool. Oh, that's so exciting. That sounds magical.
If it ever happens, let's be real.
It will.
Next year, it'll happen.
That's wonderful. That's so cool. And congratulations. It's going to
Thank
be
you.
so fun. And you might as well just plan the trip the way that you want it,
Yeah.
Make it the best that it can be. So I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Very cool.
Also, which wine fridge do you have? Because Dennis is in the market for one. So.
Oh, well, it's funny. Let me see. It's an Infinity by Wine Enthusiast. It has like 200, I think it fits like 200 bottles or 150 or so bottles. But what's funny about it is I actually got it from a wine friend of mine who ended up leaving for California. And to be honest, like in my new place, it's a little too big. So if you want a huge wine fridge that's incredibly lovely, but a little bulky, it's yours.
Well, we might take you up on that because we're like we just bought a house in February and we've been renovating it recently. And like one of the things was we'll make a wine cellar, and the wine cellar has kind of like gone by the wayside in all of our renovations. So Dennis is just like, I'm just gonna buy a wine fridge instead. So
Yeah, if you guys can move it, it's yours, honestly. Because to be honest, like I'm not kidding, we did not pay for this. So if you want to move it, I will tell you where we are at, and you are more than welcome.
Dennis has got an excited look on his face.
But it's funny, so we just moved into, I lived in like Brookline before in like a brick building, and our place was huge, and we downsized a little bit to live in like a luxury building closer to the Fenway area. And it's just like funny because I was like, this wine fridge is just going to be a little too extreme for like our situation. And it just feels like it is. So, and Matt, my boyfriend too, is really into records, and it's like taking over his record area. So
Yeah, we have a what one? We have a really tiny one. How many bottles does that fit? Like not many. No. Yeah, 18 bottles. So that's where all the nice wine goes. It goes in the tiny little wine fridge, like up in the attic where we have the air conditioner on specifically for it, because it's one of the like the electromagnetic ones that don't take too much temperature one way or the other. So like, yes, we run the air conditioner just for the wine, which is very important. But yeah, it's good.
It's funny, there's so many different wine fridges out there, and like, if I had like if I had a home sometimes too, if you have like a temperature controlled basement, that can also be such a great thing. You don't always need like, the cool like fridges and stuff, but this is actually, it is quite cool. It's just too big for
for a tiny Fenway apartment. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, it's just not the right fit. So feel free.
All right, I'll reach out about both of those things. Got 2 things to email you about now.
Okay. Cool. Well, good stuff, you guys. It's just like so much fun. And Glenn and Faith, I can't wait to chat you up more about your time in Lanesville. So have you lived in Lanesville too for a while, or is this a recent thing?
We've been in Lanesville for about 7 years? Yeah, 7 years now. And we bought the property. It was a very old house from the 50s. 20s. Old Sears kit house, and then we eventually tore it down and built a more modern year-round house. But we go back and forth between here and Lexington.
That's so cool. It's so fun. So my grandmother lives in Pigeon Cove, and so I head out to Rockport a lot. And I actually too, through Gordon's, started doing all the wines this summer for the Gloucester Stage companies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we love Gloucester Stage.
Yeah. So they're at what's it called? Windhover.
Wendover, yeah.
Yeah, which has been really fun. So it's really cool. I grew up in East Gloucester, and so my family's still out there, and we have a lot of ton of family all throughout Gloucester. But I have a family friend that lives out near one of the quarries out in Lanesville, and I love heading out there. It's such a magical spot. It's so
Well,
We love it.
We're between Plum Cove and Lanes Cove, so on the water. Yeah,
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah,
That's cool.
nice spot.
You're familiar with all of the places, and I'm sorry I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
But
that's
you
okay.
guys been to Feather and Wedge?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So we have family friends that started Feather and Wedge. And then there's a woman named Paige Farrell now who's too, I think, curating their wine list. Because for a while their wine list was not as good as their food, I felt like. Uh, and she's definitely kind of been upping their game, which is cool.
Good. Yeah.
So nice to definitely see like just how much growth has been going on in Rockport and in Gloucester. And too, so I'm glad that like you probably remember going to the market before it was
Oh yeah,
Yeah, we loved
we were
market.
regulars at the market. At
I
market.
know. I'm like, I really like the new owners at Talise. They're so nice, but I don't like the food as much as the market.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's still very nice.
It's still very nice, but it's not the same.
Yeah. So
I don't have like 20 bottles by the glass either.
no, and I worked actually, so in like high school and college, like one of my first jobs in the like industry, I guess you could say, is I pumped gas at that gas stop.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, wow.
And then actually where that host stand is, used to be a little wine and beer shop. That was, so I ran the wine and beer shop. And like, I also scooped ice cream and like sold chips and pumped gas. So it's such a fun summer job, but like it just, whenever I go to the Lobster Cove area, it's just so magical. It brings back like all of those memories.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, it's like we walk down to Lobster Cove all the time.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
Willow Rest is like another one of my favorites.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're very
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. It's a little town. It's a small world.
So fun. Well, I love it. Well, that's so cool. That's amazing. My oh, I love that there's like another Gloucester Cape Ann connection here. That's very cool. That makes me so happy. Because it's funny, I have like, I usually will do myself sometimes some of the CruBox deliveries up in the Gloucester area, because a lot of them are like family friends of mine. So I just like get to say hello. So if you ever want to
All
do
right.
Oh, that's good to know.
Could be handy.
We typically are here during the summer, but we end up going back to Lexington, like every week or two, just to check on the house and water the plants and stuff like that. So.
Well, it makes such a difference. I mean, just the temperature shift from like, Lanesville to Lexington must be like, I mean, it can be an easily like sometimes even up to like 10 degrees on some.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Definitely.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah.
So cool. Awesome. Well, it's so nice. I like love to hear that. I'm so excited.
All right.
We're kind of neighbors in a way.
Well, it's nice. It's nice. It's good. I'm glad you know all about Gloucester and Pastaio. I mean, I wish we could get more people to go there because I think they could use the business and they were amazing. So
Danielle's been doing really well. I think she's shipping too. And she's funny. So she used to work for Short and Main. She were in Short and Main's, of course, owned by the same people that own the market.
yeah.
And it's funny. So I actually grew up with Amelia, like her like adopted mother, I guess you'd say, is like one of our family's like good friends.
Mhm.
And they like both she and Nico had gotten their training out with like Alice Waters, because I think Nico, her
Yep.
husband, Alice Waters.
Yep.
And she's just like now working, I think, for the Purple Carrot. It's a vegetarian or maybe vegan food delivery company, and then they're still running Short and Main. But a lot of the people who've like been successful in Gloucester, I feel like came from like their operation.
Yeah.
Danielle's definitely like one of them. But it's been really cool to see that, see her like thrive. But she's funny. She like, it takes a while to like warm up to her, and like she has like obviously she's like very Italian.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep.
but once you make that connection, it's definitely really special. And I must say too, I don't know if you guys went there, but I'm so sad that Sandpiper left. Did you guys ever go there?
No.
Oh, we had this like unbelievable bakery right next to like where the YMCA is now. Like it's moved, but right next to City Hall, like kind of right in that general area. We had this
Yeah.
like French bakery called the Sandpiper, which made like best croissant and like everything with.
I never knew about it.
Wish we'd known about it.
They moved to Ipswich just a couple months ago, and if you're ever out in Ipswich, Sandpiper Bakery is unbelievable. It's so good
Okay.
and worth the drive. As we,
It's a long drive to Ipswich.
it is a long drive, but like I will say, it's hard to find like a really great bakery, and it's a really great bakery.
Yeah. Well,
Good to know.
Awesome. Well, this
all
was
right.
fun. Thank you guys so much. It's so nice to chat with you all.
Good to see you.
Hope you guys have a great rest of the night.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.